So here's an example of the Windows Media Player, and I've changed the colors of the arrows. As you can see, the arrows on the left are green and blue, corresponding to earth and water. And I've used green in this case. I would normally use black for earth, but you won't be able to see black as well. The colors on the right are yellow and red, corresponding to air and fire for the two arrows on the right. I've also changed the two bars on the pause button to correspond to black and white, and you'll see that those also correspond to the pillars used in Freemasonry and the pillars depicted on cards such as the High Priestess, although in this case we would have black and gray rather than black and white. So instead of having, for example, Kether and Malkuth, we would have Chokmah and Binah. I've added a few other things here that correspond to language, and I wanted to mention the fact that if you slide the bar for the volume to the left, the volume goes down. If you slide it to the right, the volume goes up. Now, the numbers also go up if you slide the volume to the right. And they go down if you slide it to the left until you reach 0 and there is nothing left. Now, nothing left also corresponds to the fact that there is a circular shape on the left, which is the pentacle. Or if you bring something down, there is the water cup, a circular shape, which is empty, corresponding to 0 or nothing. The other relationships, and there are many, are lay and lie, such as Eve lied, and that corresponds to the fact that we lie down, placing our body down horizontally, and that horizontal shape corresponds to the negative sign. It also corresponds to the horizon and the setting sun, which corresponds to the fact that we set ourselves down to sleep when the sun sets or when it becomes dark or in the evening. There are other words related. In fact, you can find many words that correspond, such as the fact that when you become unconscious, you become passive. And there is that word embedded within passive. It's not always the case. You can't find every word that corresponds that has another word embedded in it. But in this case, there are obvious relationships. The word ass is in passive, and that corresponds to behind, back, rear, also to moon someone, the moon goddess, which corresponds to the water cup, in this case, which is placed behind one in the circle. Now, when Eve lied, that resulted in the fall of man. Within fall, we have all, which also corresponds to the whole, which is spelled W-H-O-L-E, but also contains within it the word whole, H-O-L-E. Again, empty, receptive. Fall also sounds like false. So again, that corresponds to our negative sign. On the right here, I have active, and we'll notice that fact or factual has the word act in it, or true, which corresponds to positive. Also words like right, up, front, which is in the open, as opposed to closed in the evening. So if you're right up front, you're open with somebody and you're true. You're also upstanding. So here, the positive sign could be represented as simply a vertical line. So we could remove this line crossing the vertical line horizontally and simply have a vertical line, such as the number 1. Here we would have both the negative sign corresponding to a horizontal shape and a circular shape. Here we have a vertical line corresponding to the fact that when one rises in the morning and becomes conscious, at the same time that the sun also rises, one stands up and one is in a vertical position. And these do have correspondences with Masonic rituals, such as pushing somebody down and then them falling backwards, and pull corresponding to the feminine and push corresponding to the masculine. There are many more correspondences that you'll have to look into in order to see all of the connections. Once again, I've put true here corresponding to positive. So the next thing that I wanted to look at is this Masonic clock, and we can see that when we go to the left, the numbers go down and we go backwards in time. So left is back, while to the right we go forwards in time. So right is forward and the numbers go up. The next thing I wanted to look at briefly is a pentagram, and as you'll see, it's on a checkered background, and the two black squares represent earth and water, while the two white squares represent air and fire. Now we can think of the expression a checkered life, which is a life that is both up and down. So it's positive and negative. Up here we'll see that I have the top point corresponding to spirit is represented by both dark and light, negative and positive. Negative on the left side and positive on the right side. So in fact, spirit would be 0, from which everything else emanates. And if we connect the two negative elements, water and earth, we have the left side of the triangle. If we connect the two positive elements, we have the right side of the triangle. Now, the left corresponds to spirit passive, and the right corresponds to spirit active. So by connecting either the negative elements or the positive, you get passive or active. Now, the other interesting thing that we can see, first of all, we also have invoking or banishing earth using this particular line on the left. And the line on the right is invoking fire. Now, if we were to look at these arrows again, we can see that the left arrow traced to the left would correspond to banishing or turning something off, and that's the way we turn most devices off, to the left. While the right arrow, if we trace it this way, is invoking or turning something on. Now, the other interesting thing is that these shapes correspond to mathematics in that the left arrow, if we just take these two starting lines, is the less than sign, and the one on the right is the greater than sign. And if we look at an album such as The Cars, Magick, and we look at that album cover and it has two hands forming shapes, we can see that the shape forming the less than sign over the colors corresponding to the feminine element, which in this case they're using green and blue for earth and water, has a hand that has nail polish on it, making that sign, the less than sign or the banishing sign, whereas the hand that is over yellow and red corresponding to the male elements, air and fire, is obviously a masculine hand. So we can see that that is definitely being used. There's no question about it. It's not random by any stretch of the imagination. If you connect enough dots together and things correspond, they do form a picture that is definite, and it is beyond probability. We could even create statistical equations in order to demonstrate the chance or the odds of this being the case, and it is not random. So investigate this for yourself and you will see that this is the case.